bottom. So we're going to just jump right in to what I learned from my marriage and my divorce from my kid's dad. It's a really tragic story, as are all of the divorce stories. And it's one that has taken me some time and energy and emotion to heal before I could share this, because there's so much shame and guilt around my divorce and around what happened. And I really needed to understand why it happened and what got me there, and make sure that I never repeated that in my life. And so this is actually what I found. So back up, when I was 19 years old, I was a freshman in college, and brand new. 3 weeks into my freshman year at college, I met a guy, and he was the first guy I had ever dated. I never dated a lot of guys in high school, no one serious at least. And he was the first like boyfriend that I had ever had. And I knew that I just didn't feel the way I wanted to feel about the man that I was going to marry. I didn't know what love was. I had never experienced love. I didn't know what it was. I thought that maybe love was just a choice. And I really had no concept of what love felt like. How do you know that if you've never experienced it? And I remember breaking up with him every 3 weeks because I just didn't have the feelings that I wanted to have. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I am going to tell you my experiences. And I love my mom, my sister, and my brother, but this is probably the worst advice you can ever give to somebody who is trying to decide if they should marry someone. But I went to my brother and I said to him, you know what? I just don't love him. And he said, it's okay, you don't love him. And I was like, what? And he goes, is he going to get you to heaven? So I'm a Jesus girl, believe in heaven, believe in Jesus, very much Christian. And I was like, well, he's a good guy. And he said, I said to him, but I don't love him. And he said, it's okay, you don't love him. If he's going to get you to heaven, then that's all you need. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. And this brother I really looked up to. I really grew up having a desire to make him happy and to make him approve of my choices and my decisions. I was the youngest of 7 kids. And there was always somebody to tell me where to go, when to go, why to go, and everywhere I went. And here I was trying to make the biggest decision of my life, and I didn't trust myself. I didn't know how to make that kind of decision. I thought everybody else knew better than I knew for myself. And long story short, I was a virgin when we got married. And when I was dating him and I was talking to my brother that day, he said, and I said, well, I want to go to Hawaii and I want to travel Europe and I want to do this. And he says, is it a commandment to go to Europe? Is it a commandment to go to Hawaii, or is it a commandment to get married? And I was like, well, so I really let his words influence me. And then he said, who better to travel Europe with than somebody that you can have sex with? So here I was at 19 thinking like I had to get married because it was a commandment, and that my desires of like my free spirit and traveling the world and experiencing life, that those weren't as important as getting married. And I really allowed his words to influence my feelings rather than just trusting my own feelings, my own intuition, and what I truly desired for myself. And he said, you can't break up with this guy. He's the best guy you've ever dated. And in my head, I was saying, like, he's the only guy I've ever dated. And anyhow, I ended up getting back together with him and saying, like, I guess I can marry you. Like, let's do this. Even though excuse me. I jumped back in to this relationship. I was actually broken up with him during this conversation I had with my brother. And I went to him and I was like, we can get married. And I was feeling guilty for having hurt him because every time I would break up with him, I would see the pain in his eyes. And I felt responsible for that pain. And I felt like, oh my gosh, like I could take this pain away if I just got back together with him. And I didn't like the feeling that I got when I hurt him. And so rather than hurting him, I decided to hurt myself, which was to make a decision that was good for him, but bad for me. And this is the root of people pleasing, is that people pleasers continually make decisions to make other people happy at the expense of their own happiness. Truth is, it's like people pleasers, like we're people pleasing as a badge of honor, like we're noble and that it's good and that it's something that we're doing for the other person. But the truth is that it's absolutely damaging to them because you can't sustain a life where you are making choices for other people and you're not making choices for yourself. You will eventually find yourself in a complete mess of a life that you never wanted to choose for yourself, that you didn't choose for yourself, and you only chose it for other people. And you wake up one day and your life doesn't resemble anything that you actually desire. And the people that you made those decisions for are long gone, and they've long forgotten the conversations that led you to those decisions. People, when we make choices based off of people pleasing, and when we make choices based off of what other people want for us versus what we want, they don't have to live with those consequences. We have to live with those consequences. And they will forget, and we don't. We have to live with those. So here I am. I'm 19. I'm married to a man that I don't love. And I feel extremely inauthentic. I can't be honest. I can't flirt with him. I can't authentically tell him I loved him, even though he is an absolutely stellar man. He is amazing. Like I have nothing bad to say about him. He is one of the best men I have honestly ever met. And part of the problem was like me feeling like there must be something wrong with me. Why wouldn't I want him? He's all of these stellar attributes, but yet like I just didn't have those feelings, the romantic feelings that that you would want to have for your romantic life partner. So we were married then for 4 years when my oldest son passed away, which you can listen to that story on the live stream that I did about trauma and what I learned from my son's death. And I had been married for 4 years. My son died, and then we had two failed businesses. We were $100,000 of debt, and our house foreclosed. The home that our son died in foreclosed. It was at the turn of the economy back in 2007, and it just I couldn't emotionally handle it. And so here we were facing everything: death of a child, financial ruin. I never even loved him to begin with. And there was nothing left for me to hold on to with that. And I stayed in that marriage and for 8 years total, 4 years after my son passed away. And I got to the point where I was suicidal because I wanted to get out so bad. But in my faith and my religious beliefs, we definitely believe that you don't get divorced. Unless there is abuse, unless there is cheating or something ginormous to blame a divorce on, you just don't go there. You don't go there. There's always a reason, there's always a solution. You don't get divorced. And so because of the shame and the guilt around this desire that I had a desire from the very beginning to be done, I was staying in that marriage, and it was making me suicidal. The only way I could imagine getting out of the marriage was by death. And it was really a devastating emotional place to be in because I didn't want to actually die, but I didn't want to stay in the marriage. And I couldn't find the answer to my dilemma. And I actually got a really strong answer. I was praying about it one day and got this feeling that a divorced mom was better than no mom, and not to do something stupid as to take my life. And that was answer enough. I remember going to my therapist and saying, like, I don't love my husband. And she said, well, what's keeping you there? And I said, I'm going to hell if I get divorced. And she said, that's not true. But like, I'm not telling you should get divorced, but that's not true. And truthfully, the reason I was staying married was because I was afraid that if I got a divorce, that I was never going to see my son in heaven ever again. And it was devastating to my happiness. And I was staying married because I knew the repercussions of divorcing him were going to be ginormous. I am the youngest of 7 kids. I knew that my entire family would lose it, and that I would be massively judged, not just by my family, but friends, neighbors, and by everyone, right? I always just felt like divorce was a big black mark against your name, and that you're a failure. And more than anything, I was afraid of displeasing God, and to the point where I would never see my son again. And I finally, when my therapist finally told me that I wasn't going to go to hell if I got divorced, that was the moment where it gave me the courage to look down that path. And this is what I want to like make clear, is that I am not a proponent. I do not ever tell people that divorce is like the answer. And I don't encourage it. And I don't tell people that it's an easy path, because it's not. Like, divorce is so hard, and remarriage and blending families is so incredibly difficult that if you can avoid it, by all means, avoid it if you can. Like, it is the absolute last option. But also, if it is your last option and that's where you're at, you're not a bad person. And I learned, like, we are so not the person to judge anybody and their circumstances and what they're going through. And so the day that I told my husband, my ex-husband, my kid's dad, I don't like to actually call him my ex-husband. I call him my former spouse, just because I feel like ex has such a negative connotation. My kid's dad, my former spouse, his name is Joe. I called him and I said, he was on a work trip in California. And I told him, I said, I think we need to get a divorce. And he's like, what? And I had told him over the years, like, we needed to work on this, this, and this, and this. And it kind of always just fell on deaf ears. He didn't realize the gravity of how I was feeling until it was done, until I was done with it. And he flew home from California, and that day and that night we ended up talking until 2:00 in the morning, and we said our prayers and we said goodnight and we fell asleep. And 20 minutes later, we got a phone call that his mom had a stroke and that she was going to be on life support until he could come out to Oregon and take her off life support. My kid's dad, he was a single son to a single mom, and his mom was the only woman in his life until he married me, and then I was the second woman in his life. And she was really his like only family. And at 2:20 that morning, we packed up our family, our 2 little kids, and we had a daughter in there. I didn't mention that. Not that she's not important. She's a huge blessing. But we had her just 2 years after my son passed away. And we packed our kids up and we drove 16 hours to the coast of Oregon. And that night, my kid's dad lost his wife, and his mom. And it was the most absolutely devastating day in his life and in my life. Back up to before we got married, I'd had that conversation with my brother about not loving him and not wanting to marry him. And then I ended up getting engaged after I had that conversation. 3 days before we were to get married, I went to my sister and I had a whole room of gifts. 3 of my siblings and their spouses had all flown in from various parts of the country, spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars to be there. And my parents didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so the money that they had spent on the wedding was a big deal. Like I couldn't just back out and I went to my mom and I was looking for someone to just tell me like, it's okay. Like you don't need to go through this. And I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I don't love him. I think I'm making a huge mistake. And she looks at me and she says, you can't break up with this boy. You will break his heart and he will never survive. And it's like dagger in my heart. His happiness is my responsibility. And I went to my sister that same day and I said, Laura, I don't love him. And I said, what do I do? And she said, it's okay that you don't love him. Once you consummate your marriage, then you will love him. And those are the worst pieces of advice. It really fed into his happiness is my responsibility. And as a people pleaser, that's what we believe, is that other people's happiness is our responsibility. But we also believe as people pleasers is that other people are responsible for our happiness. And it's a mismatch of where responsibility really lies. So, so now fast forward, we end up going to Oregon and taking his mom off life support. And we then worked through a lot of things for about 10 months, only to find ourselves divorced about 10 months to a year later. And coming out of that marriage, I was heavily judged by my family and by my friends and by my neighbors. I was very heavily judged. I both judged myself and I judged them. And a lot of people would say, are you sure it's just not your grief? Are you sure it's not your trauma? Like, it's just your grief speaking. It's just your trauma talking. And I would always say, no, like, this is what I need. This is what I know is right for me. And the thing about people pleasing is that we make decisions to make other people happy. But the problem with that is that you can only go so long down that path before the very people you were trying to make happy, you actually hurt them at such a larger scale than you ever intended to. Your intentions are to not hurt them, but the long-term game is that it hurts more. And what I've learned about people pleasing is that it's a double-edged sword, that on one side of the sword is resentment, and on the other side of the sword is guilt. And no matter which way you slice it, you're going to feel resentment if you make a choice for other people and then it hurts you, or you feel guilty for hurting somebody else. And it's like there's never a win-win for a people pleaser. The other thing that I learned about people pleasing is that there's a cycle where we make others happy so that other people make us happy. We don't know actually innately as a people pleaser how to make ourselves happy. And it is a coping mechanism of getting our own needs met. We believe that if we meet other people's needs, then they will meet ours. And it's this cycle. But the problem with doing that is you're literally giving your power away to somebody else when you rely on them to make you happy. If you are constantly giving to make somebody else happy, but then they don't reciprocate and give back to you, then you are going to only be giving and not receiving. like if you were giving your own blood and you were only pumping blood out, but no blood was coming back in, you would only be able to sustain that for a short amount of time before you would be dead, because you don't have an endless supply to give. So what we actually need to do as a people pleaser to reverse the cycle is to first learn how to make ourselves happy, so that then we have supply to make other people happy, versus making other people happy with the hope that they will then in return reciprocate that and make us happy. So I made a few notes. I'm actually going to pull them up here just a second. I would venture to say that people pleasing is the absolute most toxic and destructive characteristic that you can bring into a relationship, because it's not sustainable. And the more you make choices to make other people happy, you will wake up one day and your life will not resemble anything that you want it to. And the people that you've made those choices for, they're going to be long gone. So people pleasing is rooted in insecurity of being able to take care of yourself, and rooted in insecurity of trusting your ability to, so trusting yourself and taking care of yourself. Typically, people pleasers, we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our choices. And so we put the power into other people's hands so that we can then blame them for our bad choices when things don't work out. What I really had to learn was when I went through my divorce, I couldn't blame my sister for the bad advice, my brother for the bad advice, my mom for the bad advice. I had to really just own that that was a decision that I made. And that is one of the best ways to actually reverse people pleasing, is to take ownership for the choices that you make, whether they're old choices and they were influenced by other people's opinions of what they wanted you to do, or your current choices. You will never be able to create your life that you want when you are making choices based off of whether or not it makes somebody else happy. The reality is that there is not one choice that you could make that would make every single person happy. It is very much okay to get okay with making people feel uncomfortable. It's okay to make people feel disappointed in you. It's okay to let people down. It's okay to feel uncomfortable with disappointing someone else. The truth is like, if we are living our life to please this person, let's say we make a decision to please this person, but this person needs a different decision. And then you make a decision to please this person. And then this person needs a different, and you're pleasing that person and this person. And you're chasing all of these people to please them, and all the while not being authentic to you. And so then this person feels like you were hypocritical because you made a choice to make them happy, but then you made a choice to make this person happy. And then these choices don't coincide. They contradict one another. And so the only way that we can truly live authentic lives is to make choices based off of what is right for us and nobody else, and then allow the people around us to be uncomfortable, to be disappointed, and recognize that it's not our job to make them happy. The only person responsible for your happiness is you. The only person responsible for your brother's happiness, for your sister's happiness, for your mom's happiness is them. And you cannot live your life making other people happy, or else it will lead you to a life of complete misery. And you will wake up one day and you will want to be dead, just like I was. I have never regretted my divorce, never, not once, even though my life has been hell since my divorce. It has been a decade of heartache and heartache, I call it. Thank you, Jacob, for being here. I appreciate you. So heartache and heartache. It's been a hell of a 10 years. honestly. But I would absolutely say that my divorce, for me specifically, was one of the best things that I could have done. It was the marker for me where I stopped living my life for other people and for what they thought was right. And I started being authentic to knowing what was right for me and listening to my own intuition, to start trusting myself and to be bold enough to make, honestly, the most important people in my life unhappy. Um, okay, so I think I really covered most of that. Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of recap some of these things. People pleasing is a double-edged sword. If you wonder if you're a people pleaser, ask yourself, do I feel resentful and do I feel guilt regularly? If you feel one of those two things, high likelihood that you are a wild people pleaser. To reverse the cycle, you've got to stop making other people happy in hopes that they will make you happy, and realize that you have to make yourself happy first, so that then you have endless supply of being able to make other people happy. And then you have to get comfortable making people feel disappointed and making people feel, honestly, being okay with other people's disappointment and being okay in people's disagreement with you. And even if they hate you, it doesn't care. It doesn't matter. So anyway, I'm going to stop here. Go ahead and like and comment on my comment or on my video here, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing my lives. I'm going to be trying every day at 4. Hopefully I don't get stuck in another accident that keeps me on the highway for an hour cooking in my convertible. So we're going to be talking about a whole gamut of things. In my last video that I did yesterday about trauma after my son died, we go through my trauma from my son's death, my divorce, my car being stolen in perspective, remarrying a pathological liar, being raped, going to jail in London, and marrying the man of my dreams, and then being bankrupt 2 years later. So we have got a lot of information to cover. And we're going to be really diving into some of these like massive gold nuggets that have so lovingly found me over the last 12 years. So Jacob, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate you. I'm glad that it helped. And join us again. Okay. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.